Hello, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Seems like just minutes ago we spoke.
They're they're start they're starting to blur.
I used to have a group that talked initially 7 times a week for an hour and 15 minutes, and that lasted a couple of years. So it's been intense, multiple fronts.
Hello, Anna.
Hi. Hi, Sam. Hi, Doug.
Morning, Anna. How are you?
Good.
So it's afternoon or evening for you?
Afternoon. Late.
4 p.m.?
What's that?
Is it 4 p.m.?
4 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful day. We're having a heat wave at the moment.
Yeah, in the summer, 4 p.m. feels like noon.
Yeah. The whole of this week is supposed to be over 20 degrees, which for us is, the north of England is really something. And in London, it's going to be over 30.
Wow.
So we're enjoying it. How are you guys?
Yeah, in this part of the world, I think it's perfect. It's like high 60s, low 90s in Fahrenheit, so it's probably not even 20, probably about 18, 19 degrees. Hi, Lucy.
Hi, Lucy.
And it's green. And the air is good.
Yeah, we haven't had any rain for a while, and it looks like, everything's going to dry up. We're not going to have it for another couple of weeks, it looks like, yeah. And just last week, I got caught in a thunderstorm of thunder and lightning, and my phone was totally drenched. And this week it's heat wave. Hello, Puss.
Is this a her or a he?
We should guess.
This is Lucifer. Lucifer used to be a he.
Well, let's not get hung up on gender distinctions.
He may be gender fluid.
He can do whatever he wants.
I never thought I'd live to the day my daughter, 14 years old, she comes home and tells me, my school is gender fluid. There's quite the spectrum here up in the Pacific Northwest.
So how does Lucifer deal with, how many puppies do you have? Like 18?
3 big ones and 14 little ones.
Yeah, so how does Lucifer deal with all of a sudden being grossly outnumbered?
He watches. In fact, he was sitting on a bench about 12 inches above the floor when Tia was giving birth. So he watched every single one come out with intent.
Wow.
Yeah, with intensity is what I meant. He didn't do that with Hera quite so much. And actually, they just bounce around. They just walk around. He just walks right in the middle of them. He doesn't pay them any mind. He's not threatened by them. He's not. But when they get too close and like they want to lick him, then he kind of snarls. But he keeps them at bay.
For now.
For now. Yeah, right now, he still outweighs each individually, but soon they're going to all outweigh him individually.
Yeah. He'll be tested a few times, I'm guessing.
Well, he still holds his own against Zeus, who's about 91 pounds.
Oh, well, there we go then.
In fact, I miss my puppies. I'm going to have to do the requisite puppy introduction.
Yeah, you have to bring a puppy. Maybe he'll come back with 2, like one under each arm.
How are you, Lucy? What's happening with you?
Oh, how am I? Lots is happening on the inside. I listened to the call from yesterday with everyone. That was a very nice way to start the day. But then I guess it percolates a bit through the day and brings up a lot of questions and partial insights. I don't know how to give you a short answer, Anna, but I guess reflecting on a little bit how I'm working, the work I'm doing, my collaborations right now, my collaborations in the past. Hey, Glenn. Like past frustrations, current frustrations, and trying to make some sense of all of that. And then just accepting that's maybe not something I can make sense of. The sense will come on its in its own good time. Yeah, so that's going on.
Interesting to know how listening to the. I haven't actually listened to the. I'm hearing an echo. Why am I hearing an echo? Is everybody else hearing an echo?
No, I can't hear one.
Okay.
I'm getting one.
Yeah, I'm hearing an echo too.
So I was just going to say, it's interesting to know how listening to the session yesterday, which I haven't heard, how you felt that was influencing the way you were thinking about your work.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what Tammy shared about what she had been searching for, wanting to make a contribution, wanting to belong, is exactly the same for me. You know, and when you hear, and I've known these things, but hearing somebody else articulate it, I think it lands on another level. That wanting to, I don't know whether I'd maybe put it in different words than she did, but wanting to achieve something as a group, to be part of a change as a group, independent almost of what that work is or what the outcome is, but that to experience that process is quite a deep longing of mine. I've had some experiences of it, I guess, with kind of sport or with being outdoors in nature, you know, when you're part of a team. And I've had a very special experience of it with the woman who I set up the charity that I run. She and I have been on a very special journey together. You know, of doing almost like having a baby together, you know, being parents of something and deciding how you want it to look and be, and dealing with your own challenges, dealing with the other person's challenges. But yet there's still something which is unsatisfied. And I'm kind of curious what that is. Is it something that's really, maybe it's another longing that I'm not quite clear on, or is it something really collaborating in this shared space towards a shared purpose? I think it is that. I've had tastes of it maybe, and believe that there's much more is there to experience, and there's almost a bit of a grief, maybe is too strong a word, but there's something that's a bit painful when that doesn't work out. You know, when you believe in it strongly, you kind of search for another opportunity to try it again. So all of those things, just from listening to that conversation. And Tammy's poem, I guess some of you are probably familiar with it. It sounded like that. But that had a huge impact. I sat there just with tears running down my face listening to her read it. Yeah, it was really beautiful. Really, really good. I feel guilty because the puppy came in and then left. Yeah.
I think part of the question, and it's a it's actually a question for today because it's what I came in harboring as a potential sort of launch landing. I think it might be worth sort of maybe unpacking a little bit. Hey, Karl, welcome.
Hey, Karl. Good to see you.
Lucy shared a watch back, some stuff she got from a watch back of the session yesterday in barn raising. And we started a new practice sort of experiment, which we're calling collective show and tell. And the idea under the barn raising rubric was that each person has the floor to share what they bring, what their vision is for the future, what they want to build, what they want to create, and ultimately what they want as a generator, co-generator. And at the root of it as a practice is really an opportunity to truly be heard on as full a portion as it's possible to give, short of being in the same physical space together. And Lucy, what you just shared for me sort of goes to the essence of that, which is in the experiential human end of embodied end of being with others. We're sort of programmed to focus on, okay, what do you got? What do you bring? What's your value? What's your space, right, entitlement, in the scheme of things. And I think on an almost gut level, at least I was very much once upon a time programmed about, it was much more about proving that I was worth it and of value being part of whatever it was than it was about whatever was being created. Like that was a much more dominant overriding driver than tuning into the field and connecting and figuring out of a we space and field and place and collaboration, okay, what's the it and how do we want to work together and what's our approach, and a true sort of open, connected, collectively generated field. And part of the hunger of that is, I wonder whether part of the hunger of that is the degree to which the sort of flip side of the ask in what Tammy shared and what you just shared is, how do we, from a place of generosity, create the channel, the container, the field, and the opportunity so that, on entry, you just know that you're loved and welcome on a core fundamental level, that you're loved, welcome, valued, appreciated just for showing up. No expectation, quid pro quo, stir, add in required. And how do we, is there some kind of, I don't think it's a languaging or anything prescriptive, but how do we, in the spirit of the unblocking Sundays, how do we introduce the ability for people to ask for that, if that's part of what would really help them get in the flow and engage. And it'd be okay. It'd be like, prioritized as opposed to, well, I'm making it about me, or I'm being selfish, or I'm not entitled, or all of the that self-talk stuff going on in the back of everybody's head about opening up their mouth, about even speaking often. So with that, I'm complete, but I wanted to sort of throw that out.
So your question was a little bit, Doug, about how do we make sure that people feel that safety to ask for that time. As somebody who's still new to this group, when I say you, I consider myself now part of the group. I say you as in those of you who've been around longer. You all gave me the feeling of being very welcome, or very safe, or both of those. As a group and as individuals, you're all a collection of people who have a great amount of knowledge, who show a great amount of wisdom. I consider those two things different, and who are also very good at articulating yourselves, and that's quite intimidating, I think, or can be. But it doesn't. As soon as you join one of these experiences, I don't think being intimidated is something somebody experiences, or at least it wasn't what I experienced. But I think the other side is that we have to trust ourselves, don't we? That we are loved, and that we're welcome to speak and share and to ask for things. And at least for me, I would say that that's maybe a bigger part, is that, if I have to trust myself in order to trust others to join these things and share in this way. And so I think there's, part that there's maybe things a group can do to make others feel welcome. But I think a big part is an individual journey of testing that and trusting that and pushing our own boundaries to do that.
I seem to remember that we have had a discussion about safety before. What does it mean to be safe? And is it something that others can provide for you? Or is it something like Lucy says, that somehow you have to come to that point in yourself? Over.
I like always to look at things. Oh, sorry, Glenn.
Yeah, I just wonder, maybe it's a combination of the two, in a sense that, well, if maybe one or more people bring this inside, this sense of safety, then that transmits over, perhaps. Certainly a help. Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
So I think the safety notion is an interesting one, because it's both a personal and a group dynamic, and each is a spectrum. So in a personal, from the time you're a baby to the time you actually attain, I guess, a samurai status, there's different feeling of safety. And there is that element of growth and awareness where at some point you feel safe no matter where you are. But when you start, you're dependent on other people providing for you. Similarly, in an environment where we have people, it can be a hostile world if we choose to make it that way, as many of us feel the world is. Or we can be a place that sort of models the new kind of society we want to live in, which I think is what we're trying to do here. That still doesn't provide safety for those who are not yet able to feel safe. So it's in both domains. It's in the group and how the group carries itself, but it's also equally on the individual and how they live in the world. So it's always a spectrum. It's never an either or. And the dynamic is interesting.
Yeah, I would say, well, this is Karl. I've haven't met Lucy before, so I would say that there's safety, but it's within a group too. I mean, there are people that I wouldn't. There are people I'm not going to trust. There are people who just their agendas are just not are incompatible with mine. So, but so I feel it's within a community. That's one of the reasons, like, I don't, when I hear about collective intelligence, that's really not possible. There's community intelligence because there has to be that level of trust. In fact, Karl X. Wybe, I think it was, it talks about trust is the bandwidth of human communication and things. So there does. But yeah, this group, I mean, well, I knew Sam and Doug ahead of time, really, but other people like Glenn and Anna I've met just probably a couple months ago, and we've developed a very strong sense of trust within this community and things and stuff. But yeah, so and then even within that too, it's like, is this conversation if it was really kept within the group, but what's happening with the recording, if that goes out to the world, then I am restricted. I got to try to be restricted to what I am willing to share. So and things. So that the recording makes it changes the dynamic too.
I actually had that sort of twinge around recording and a conversation with Tammy about that. But could you drill down on that more? Like, what is that about, that subtle shift and of this is being recorded, this is not being recorded? And part of the question is also coming from a place of, I arrived at a place in my life where I got no secrets. Like, I got nothing that I have any problem with being completely exposed and shared wherever, good, bad, or ugly, whatever it is. So I'm receding from sensitivity around exposure as a mean, but I think but it is a big difference. It is a big shift to say, this is for posterity. There's going to be an artifact. It's forever. What is that about? What's provoked or poked with that?
Yeah, well, the joke about what happens in Vegas stays on YouTube, whatever now, and things. But so there's that. I mean, there's if you're thinking about kind of a crazy idea, do you really want to be on the record, or do you want to have plausible deniability for what accidentally comes out of your mouth, or like the whole type of things? Because there really isn't, that at times there isn't do-over. I mean, if you share knowledge, I mean, like if it's like how to build a nuclear weapon or something, you don't want that just out there. So those are two restrictions that I see. But
I have one little thing that came to me, and that is that if we're having generative conversations, creative conversations, where we try to learn and we try to look at possibilities which haven't yet been manifested in the world. That seems to be one part of what we're doing, of the so-called the project, so to say, of thinking together, learning together. It's this an exploration of the unknown, I guess we could call it. So when exploring the unknown, sometimes we try to express ideas which are kind of dwelling in the back of the mind, but they haven't perhaps ever been expressed before. And in the expression, they're probably going to be certainly incomplete, and perhaps they will sound nonsensical or over the top or something like that. So I guess that seems to be a part of this investigation into the unknown, is this vulnerability that we sort of expose something incomplete or not quite formed, and by putting it forth and by it being received, and then we're into the whole space, there is a hope that it might be more formed after a while, more informed, and that the sharing of this incomplete idea, which may be a very promising idea, but yet in its current form incomplete, that might be a part of the growth of the idea and the growth of something which comes from the deeper subconscious layers of the mind or something, but which this expression of it in words is a new adventure for that. So then, of course, there is something about this whole this whole scenario of generative conversation, which really invites us to share these things which in their first formulation might sound quite absurd and strange, and perhaps it might sound ridiculous, and maybe even a part of it is to be a little bit ridiculous and be playful and take some chances and just sort of go out on a limb and just try something out and see where it goes. And if something interesting comes out, maybe it can be pursued. If something comes out that sounds, no, that isn't right, then I can put that aside, and that's interesting too. So I guess that there's something about this dynamic of these conversations that really invite these things from us which might sound really, really ridiculous. So then I guess that does put into perspective that it's recorded. There's Tammy. Hey. Yeah.
Well, it feels really good that those first sort of first little shoots of an idea actually do get recorded, because they're really valuable. But I just wanted to go back for a moment to the theme that Doug introduced, because I had the feeling that what he was asking was, because when we spoke about the fact that we feel safe, we don't really know how we got to this point. Was there anything particular that we were doing? And so I felt that Doug was asking, can we be conscious of what we did so that, you know, if we wanted to hand it on to somebody else or tell somebody else about it, was there anything specific that we did that created this safe space? That was how I heard it.
Yeah, that was part of my ask, definitely, was, you know, is there a way to unpack and bring to surface and expression the ingredients of safety, and not about, you know, prescription or practicum, but the sort of values that were manifested and exhibited. Because I think there's been a lot of alignment in this group over the last year, that, you know, if we sort of, you know, looked in the rearview mirror, all of us have tacitly, behaviorally, and explicitly embodied in how we've related to the conversations, how we've related to each other, how we've shared, how we've welcomed, invited, how we've questioned or responded to ripples in the field. If somebody hit one, and, you know, it's really ephemeral stuff, I get. But it would be really nice if it could be brought to a level of, you know, expression. I guess what I'm looking for is from a shareability standpoint, from a narrative, able to tell a story standpoint. Because it plays such a foundational role in enabling folks to sort of experience themselves as part of, and entitled and empowered, and safe enough to share their voice, their vision, their dreams, their whatever.
So I just wanted to ask, is this feeling of safety unusual? We're asking it as though it were unusual, but I don't think it is. When you get together with neighbors, when you get together with other people in other forums, and I know some of you are on definitely other forums as well, online, using Zoom, isn't there a similar feeling of acceptance and safety and listening? I don't think it's that ephemeral. I don't think it's that hard to capture. So I think it's a way of being neighborly. It's a way of being familiar that, to me, doesn't seem quite so strange or quite so unique. But that may just poke a little bit. I'm just being a little bit pokey here.
When you asked that question, Sam, it dropped down for me that I take my feeling of safety with me. It's not something that's given to me necessarily by a group, but I carry it around with me because I show up in some group situations, less so now because I'm more fussy, where it's not a very safe environment. but I create that safety for myself, so I still, I adjust based on who am I with and what's the context and what's the agenda. Yeah, it's portable.
Well, I feel this is very special. It isn't something that I find in local groups. I think there has to be a particular focus. Of course, there are other groups who have a focus where you can feel safe in this way. But although I feel I take my safety around with me, I also feel that there are definitely some groups where it's not so much that I wouldn't feel safe, it's just not appropriate to talk on that level or on this level that we're talking now. I have a little sort of garden area which other people use, and there's a guy who came to sit in it, and he's a lovely guy, but he does tend to talk on this level of sort of boasting about stuff that he's doing, and a sort of typical male competitive sport thing. He's very into golf and football, and I have sort of weathered it for a bit, and there are times when I just say, I can't take this. So it's not so much a question of, well, yes, it is. I mean, is it safe for me to say, look, just shut up? I mean, it's just because the focus isn't there. There is no focus. This is the way that most people interact and communicate. So for me, coming to a place where we focus, I couldn't even say what it is that we're focusing on, but we're definitely focused here. And what I say feels that it has a meaning and a significance, which is much more than just, tossing out some bit of information or, the general way that we interact with people, making conversations, chit chat. Yeah, Lucy.
You gave me a thought, Anna, with what you just said, that so feeling safe or not is like about avoiding a negative, isn't it? There's going to be a negative consequence for me that I don't have to worry about if I feel safe. Whereas what I was hearing and what you said and what resonates with me is that this group is about a positive experience. It's more like this feels a this is fun. This is fills a need or a longing or a way of expressing things and sharing that with other people. It's much more. It's not avoiding a negative. It's gaining a positive. And I think this word curiosity came into my head as somebody else was speaking earlier, and that feels a little bit like what is a very strong feeling that comes out from this group in how, and I'll go back to the you again, but how you all talk to each other, listen to each other, the questions asked. I think if you're dialed in, then you immediately recognize that and appreciate that in other people when they're really listening and asking questions because they genuinely want to know and to understand, or when they add something on, they're not trying to show their knowledge or that they know something better, but they're trying to build on what somebody else has said. Now I think that creates this safety or fun also?
I think it's really interesting because we have had in the past have had to deal with quite a lot of negativity. That's how I experience it. I don't know how other people experience it, but certainly to begin with, I know that for me in particular, there were questions, what are you doing here? You know, why are you here? A sort of feeling that what you have to bring isn't relevant. But there were also, I mean, this was particularly this session was about unblocking. So it was about looking at the negative stuff that we bring with us, particularly. You know, it's actually talking about this, it makes me realize how much we've sort of worked through as a group. Yeah. Over.
Yeah, just had a few remarks. I mean, there's so many great things that have come up here. Because well, one thing Sam mentioned about this being neighborly and how there's something natural about feeling safe when you get together with people, and it's also been mentioned that it's also something from the inside that you can have this sense of safety and you can carry it from place to place, and I guess that's something which will change the dynamic of any group a great deal. And Anna mentioned this, how on different occasions it's a sense of what's appropriate to talk about. And what I've noticed is that when I'm in different groups, that there's very often a specific agenda for the group as a whole, which is sort of in the background, kind of frame of why we're here. And with this group, it's a little bit different because it's more of a sense that we're here to be present and to explore something together. And then it's that curiosity and this real interest in listening, which is very central to it. And that is, I totally agree, Anna, that is a somewhat unique way to be with people that maybe in daily life there's not that many of those places. But maybe there are some, and I would like to have more of it because it feels very natural. But one other thing which came to me when Sam said that about being neighborly is the feeling that I've often had when I've met people. And even last week I was in this job interview, and I mean, people you don't know, and it's supposed to be a really tense thing, etc. But even there, after a little while, it was like we settled into something, and there was this sense of, I don't know, neighborliness, but it's not something you can put into words. But I've noticed it many times that when I get together with people, in the beginning it's like you're a little bit tense, etc. But then after a little while, very often there is this sense that kicks in, that this sort of being together, it just finds its own safety, it finds its own flow, so to say, and there's certain things we say without really thinking about it, which is this sharing, this natural sharing. And And sometimes there is this natural curiosity. It can take many forms, but it's like this just happens when humans come together. That's the feeling I have. It just happens. And sometimes there's something else which distracts it, but sometimes it just happens anyway. And maybe what we're here, it seems that we're having conditions where we're trying to just allow it to happen, and not. I mean, we're sort of working with that, I guess. But yeah, that's. I felt that several times. That, somehow it's just very natural to feel safe and to be curious and interested when people gather together.
To me, it's curious how we use the word natural to describe this thing that didn't exist 2 or 3 or 4 years ago for most of us. But by that, I mean Zoom. To me, it actually still doesn't feel natural. Natural to me would be passing you in the hallway, or, while I'm getting something out of the refrigerator, or, coming out of the bathroom, or, with my hair all in a mess and shirt untucked, all these sort of things. We don't do that. We actually come into this place where 3 years ago, none of us were doing something like this. But yet we've developed a habit, a convention that now we're comfortable with. So it is something that we acquire. It is something that we do, quote unquote, like you say, Glenn, settled into. But it's not something that, to me, I would use the word natural with. Although aspects of it are natural in our humanity, but this itself isn't quite that way. Over. For me.
Do you then mean like the setting of sitting in front of computers? Because that certainly feels.
I would rather that we all gather and I bring some, spaghetti, and somebody else brings some bread, and somebody else brings some ice cream, and I'd rather we gather around a nice big table. And we're able to just, have some side chatter or some main chatter or whatever. That feels natural. This, where one person speaks and everyone else is listening so intently, afraid to be not present, that doesn't feel natural to me. Well, I've got the floor. Let me say one more thing about the safety and recording business. It seems to be that some people are uncomfortable with recording because there seems to be some either innately assumed or some externally imposed set of standards that if we didn't meet those standards, one would be, quote unquote, embarrassed or something, to be on record as saying. For me, I'd rather say the opposite. I'd rather see that, hey, today I can be an idiot. Maybe next month I can be a little bit smarter. I'd rather that evolution be visible to others. That I'm not just a static person who's just able to just deliver at B+ level or A- level, and that's where I'm pegged. I want people to see the dynamic movement of my understanding and my growth. And that, to me, represents something that can be derived, not by me, maybe not by you, but perhaps later, by having these artifacts. Because there's many things going on here other than what's coming out of the speaker's mouth. And if we don't have these recordings, those are lost. So to me, the fact that someone feels afraid or embarrassed to be on record, to me, gives me cause for alarm. Gives me reason to think, hey, is there a set of standards I should be following here that I'm not? Should I be embarrassed because I just blurred out everything I'm thinking and I'm going to be embarrassed about it later? So to me, there's that dynamic going on as well. Over.
Yeah, I would say that it's not the people that are on the call. If this is recorded and publicly available, I have no idea who could potentially be listening to it, particularly if you start getting into indexing chats and things. So there is that kind of it, at least from my my perspective.
Fine. The Russians are listening. Okay, then what?
And I think that's, I mean, I'm just saying, I think that's probably much applies pretty generally. And then I guess one other thing too is like we are developing a set of norms and things like if we're kind of sick and coughing a lot, we mute or we go off video and things. So that there are certain norms that are developing now too. I still haven't really, I've only once or twice been in a group that's large enough to go to multiple screens and things too. But then I think there's like some things there where if you hide non-video participants and only people who want to speak are on video and things, and like if Sam wants to say something, then you turn your video on, and then people know, oh, Sam wants to say something, so you kind of can work them into the conversation. Then and then also video too. You're not seeing 25 people on the screen when you're watching a video later and things. So I think there's all kinds of little things like that are happening. And then and we also identifying, like we could send a message to Zoom. It's like, this is really annoying. You need to fix this or whatever. And, or build your own tool, but I don't, I don't see that happening as much too. This, in fact, I was just writing for one of my papers. It seems like, well, the World Wide Web unleashed this new like ecosystem that was there's a complete void, and then people were able to rush in and fill a void there and create a niche. And even if their product was lousy, they've gotten dominance and things too. So there's that kind of aspect of things going on that I see. So.
I was really curious when you or really interested, excited, Sam, when you mentioned, when was it, earlier this week or last week, about the suggestion of like a physical meeting with everyone. And then with what you were just saying, I was wondering to what extent does this way that we meet and share give us some kind of safety that we don't fully show up? Because it's like I can make sure I tuck my shirt in before I come. I can sit down in front of the camera, and like what would shift if we were to do that? Has anyone kind of reflected on that? Or
yeah, I don't feel the need to take a shower before I come on to these sessions. Literally, whereas if I was to meet you in person, I'd probably shower first. It's a silly example, but it's one of the illustrative ones. Sorry, Glenn.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That there's a certain safety also in this sort of having the conversation from your own home, but it also brings me to my mind that how would the feeling of this dynamic change if it was a very different software? For example, let's say we were wearing goggles and we could see three-dimensionally the people around us as if we were in a virtual room. Or even if instead of seeing rectangular cells, we had circular cells which were formed like a group sitting together or something like that. And if that also perhaps was transmitted over to video, that might change the feeling of the whole thing quite a lot. And so it's interesting what you said, Karl, that there's certain of these standards that have sort of been put into the internet. Just like the fact that we're taking it for granted to have rectangular screens. you know, it's easy to imagine an internet which is very different. And certainly, of course, if we get into three-dimensional technologies and virtual reality and that kind of stuff, which some people say is sort of around the corner. I mean, just an interesting question. How would that change the feeling? Also, just Sam, about this natural thing. Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't feel that this, with the computer, but it's more that when people get together, it feels just natural to have a sense of safety and openness and curiosity, and that even with these weird boxes and technology, it still somehow seems to work.
I feel if we actually got together physically, and then we had to shower and make sure that we, you know, had nice clothes on, and the whole feel for me would be different. I mean, I'm not saying that eventually we might not settle and become relaxed in each other's company, but to begin with, it feels like there would be a formality about it, which wouldn't be the same as me being relaxing here in my own space and just being able to talk to you. So there are advantages either way, I guess.
But Anna, isn't that a little bit how it usually is? That it's a sense of formality in the beginning when people get together, and then after a little while, it's sort of just that thing disappears and becomes more informal and natural. I even feel it here, like in the beginning of a conversation, it's like sometimes it's a little stiff, and then after a little while, you kind of just ease into it.
Yeah.
I think it seems very normal.
You know, what just came up for me is there's sort of a stacked level of dimensions in interaction, and the top of the food chain is 3D, like in person, and this is sort of a drop below that, right? And within the frame of this, there's a whole universe of sort of knowing and familiarity and awareness and protocol that isn't invoked, right? So if I walk into Glenn's house, I don't know whether it's okay for me to just go to the fridge and grab myself a drink. And I also don't know who else is in Glenn's house, who was doing dishes. And I don't know, like, there's a world of stuff I don't know. So that doesn't go to diminish the level of connection, trust, feeling awareness, embodied awareness, connection that's been established here in terms of my sense of knowing you, right? But there's a lot more on the plate in 3D to assimilate and become aware of and grapple with and navigate and figure out and escalate that. So one-on-one, that's a universe unto itself. And then times 6 or 8 or 10 or 35, like it's not additive, it's exponential, right? In terms of the complexity and volume of data and personal individual awarenesses, sensitivities. I mean, it's sort of perfect. This is coming up in the unblocking frame. But, you know, it's okay for me to put my feet up on the table when I visit Karl, but like, you know, if I did that with Anna, she'd beat me with a stick. I don't know. I just don't know. And And then a group of people, to compound the crime, a group of people get together in a in a completely neutral place. Like, let's all meet at, Little Dick's Bay and Virgin Gorda. And so you eliminate a lot of the individual attachment to place that meeting at somebody's house might bring, but you have a whole new layer of stuff to figure out. So it's like really, really complicated, and we don't relate to any of this on a conscious level. This is all left to random.
I'd also like to ask ourselves, is this an evolution that we have gone through, or is this a filtering process that has also made others less willing to show up in this forum? We use English. You have to have a computer to participate. You have to have a reasonably good mic. You have to have a reasonably quiet room. You have to have 2 or 3 or 4 hours, to devote to something like this. At least 90, because that's what the schedule says. You have to be willing to listen to each other without interrupting, or at least, that seems to have been a theme that we've talked about. I'm not sure that we've actually agreed on that. I see Tammy smiling. So there are a number of things that we've done that have attracted certain people, and those of you who are here, and have made others still kind of, sit on the sidelines and wait and see whether or not they're ready. And so I'm asking whether we feel this is an evolution or whether there's some filtering process going on. We don't see anybody, for example, under 20. And I really think that this whole talk about the future needs to be intergenerational, interdecades. So I keep thinking about the stuff that's not here, so that we can think about, how we can connect with them if we really want to do that, since we are in this global thing that we call global. So those are the questions I keep asking ourselves. Over.
Hi.
One of the things.
I'm going to jump in.
Sorry.
First, thank you, everyone. That yesterday was wonderful, and I'm kind of still in that gratitude place. And to your point, Sam, yeah, I think it is a filter. People have to be willing to be recorded, show up, and have all of the technology available and all of those things. As you guys were talking, I was reflecting on, I don't know how many of you have been on the Next Edge Facebook page, but that's part of where I kind of started to be engaged and introduced to a lot of the new economy, next paradigm humans. And they did a gathering in Montreal in 2015 after the page. I think it was going from 2012 or 13 or something like that. So there was 3,000 members or somewhere in there. And I joined as they were as the planning was happening. So I ended up going, and it was amazing. I mean, I got to meet Fleming and Art Brock and just a huge amount of amazing humans that we're all friends with. Many of us are friends with in our interlocking networks. And yeah, it was an explosion of humans. There was so much richness in the room that it was definitely overwhelming. And there's no way to really make all of the connections. And I talk about widening the pipe, how much information can a person take in, and yeah, it was a lot. And so I think that these spaces, I like, what Anna was saying about, I'm here in my home. I can make my cup of tea. I can show up exactly as who I am. And I think that's a huge benefit. But also we are widening the pipe. So having some kind of constraint is also, I think, a staging for our development to be able to really take in more information and kind of create the protocols we're creating. And I have a sense of slowing things down so that they can be seen, heard, received. And, bless you. And and that's an important part of what the format here is in Zoom, is to, yes, there's one person speaking at a time. Otherwise, you can't hear each other. And we're kind of slowing down the conversation so that all of the parts can be heard. And, we're being sensitive to each other to feel where in the group who is next to speak. So we're building this capacity to sense by, what we can see through the constraints of our square boxes and this. So I think, I feel that those are all staging elements for us to really be able to connect more deeply, be family. I see this as a campfire, it could be a kitchen table too, but, we're sitting around the campfire telling stories and showing ourselves and seeing each other. And I will close with just so much gratitude for everyone here, everyone who's not here, and this process we've been on and this journey.
And then there can also be moments of silence, which is which is nice too, for introverts. I am going to have to go here pretty soon. We've got deadlines for school here, and I'll be traveling some, so I'll be here maybe a little bit next week and the 8th, but then be out for a couple of weeks. So I found this group a couple months ago, and we just resonate with each other. We have similar purposes and areas of interest and everything. So we've kind of connected, and I've been trying to start meetup groups, and so I have 2. So I know we had Sam was over in Europe, and we have Heiner in Berlin. So Sam was able to I'll make a side trip to Berlin so I can talk with Heiner in person. Now, I don't know if you've met him before or you met him in this space, but I think a lot of people, like if I'm in Seattle, I'd be meeting up with Sam and see if it's close enough for Tammy or and things. So I think that's part of it. So
drive to see Tammy.
Yeah, so that fact, this how we engage each other online, what makes it compelling for people to get together in person, even if do I even talk to my next door neighbors and stuff? It's very, very rare and things these days. But so that's one of the things I'm looking at. Can we have a group if like I was just checking, I'm the only person listed in Alexandria, Virginia in this group. But I'm sure if I expanded that out a little bit to general DC area, there'd probably be a couple people. So that's where I'm interested. How can we make these kind of online meetings effective enough so they do get people meeting in person, the ones who are local. So
I still like setting a date. I know it's going to be arbitrary. It's not going to get everybody, but let's set a date, whether it's July 4th, whether it's December 9th, let's set a date. Let's set a place. Or maybe let's just set a date and we could have multiple places. Like, the London people can gather, the Vancouver people can gather, the Berlin people can gather. And then let's get, that dynamic going. I still think that would be an interesting thing to propose. So I'm going to go on record right now. There can be other dates, but let me put at least December 9th on the table. Echo, cancel. Because it's far enough out that it gives people almost no excuse if they really want to go to not go. Okay? Especially if we have multiple places. And let's say one of the places is either Seattle or Vancouver. And then, maybe, Doug, maybe you want to come out here, or maybe you want to do something in New York. Glenn, I'm sure I've got a couple of friends in Oslo that you guys could hook up with together. Lucy, I don't even know where you are. So maybe you can make one of our locations here. So let me at least toss out December 9th. Karl knows why I'm proposing December 9th, but
yeah.
let's put that. And if we want to do something before then, let's do that too. I'm on record. December 9th, let's get together, some of us. At least one other person, okay? I'm at least going to go see Tammy on December 9th if nothing happens between now and then or sooner.
Is that the Demo of All Demos anniversary?
Yeah, that's the 50th
one.
Anniversary of Doug Englart's Mother of All Demos, yes.
Yeah, so there'll be a group gathering in the Bay Area. We kind of know that. So
are you going to that, Karl?
I'm thinking about it. Like I've had some emails with Howard Reingold too. And it's like that. That's probably the only time, or the next time I can get out there, and it's got to be for multiple reasons and things. I got school too, which is that's actually where I'm traveling to Chicago for a week and have lots of expenses. One of the professors says there's got to be a reason you're in the PhD program and not buying a Lamborghini. So, yeah, actually, I will have to go here, but it's been a great conversation. And as I said, yeah, the in-person things, I really like that idea. And if you're going to be in DC, if you're going attending a conference, like there's the ISSS the conference in Oregon. So I don't know if Sam's going to that, but it's close enough where, people who are, you could gather. So. Okay, with that, I'll be seeing you then.
Yeah, thank you, Karl.
Lucy, you were muted. Where are you?
Yeah, I realised that. It's like when you get cut off from the phone from someone and you're still talking, and then you feel like an idiot afterwards. I'm in Sweden, quite far in the north right now, but I'm planning to move further south to Stockholm. So Oslo isn't far, the UK isn't far. Yeah. No, I'd be willing to. I don't know what my calendar will look like in December. Traveling in Europe's easier to fix. I think it could be kind of fun.
I might alter my proposal by 1 or 2 days simply because December 9th is such an important day. I've not actually been part of the planning activities for this year because, to tell you the truth, I've been part of the planning for Doug Engelbart events since 2008. I put together an event on the 40th anniversary. And ever since then, to me, and it could be just me, the focus has been so much on technology and less so on the human side of things. And even as a technologist, I think that the human side coevolution is so under-recognized and so underappreciated that to me, I just had to detach a little bit. I still support what they're doing, but to me, it seems like not enough progress is being made on us trying to grow up. It's more like us trying to play with our toys rather than us trying to grow up. And if we keep playing with our toys, making bigger, better toys and faster toys, we're just bringing about the wall faster and faster. I think this coevolution thing, it's not for nothing that Doug recognized it, 60 years ago plus. And yet, we still don't really grasp it. We still don't really practice it. I mean, some of us are appreciating it, but we as a society, as a civilization, don't get it. I mean, just look at the people that are running the world, quote unquote. You know, we're far from it. And if that persists, I'm not sure we deserve to survive. But, you know, we are the light at the end of the tunnel if we really are looking at it that way. We have to be those lights for each other.
Yeah, I feel that's really one of the essential needs today. Is this relation between us and the technology, and to actually to come back and embody our responsibility in that respect, because the technology is simply an extension of human activity, and so it, yeah, we actually can't meaningfully talk about technology without the human being and how we how we do it, just how we are with the machines. And that seems to be under-recognized somehow. It's a little bit weird that we talk, for example, about artificial intelligence as if it's this thing in a box that just lives its own life, because it's not. I mean, we are the ones who are governing the process. So if we can really make headway in understanding the relation between the human being and technology, and really live that seems like a part of the big need today.
One more mini rant. You know, we recognize the dangers of setting one simple metric and optimizing that one simple metric, and by that I mean profit, to guide our decision-making as businesses, as economies. And even the people who are proposing socially responsible ways of running organizations still propose this thing that I was surprised they call a triple bottom line. But is that enough? You know, it's still a very, very small set of things, and yes, there's still games to be played about how those things are measured. It basically is trying to, I think, make a token effort, it feels like to me. Whereas if we were really, really thinking more systemically and more human and humanity-centric, profit would be a side effect. It's not the focus. And yet it's still up there as one of the big three. And that to me still feels very backward.
The concept of profit itself is foundationally at the core of this old paradigm that's gotten us where we are. Profit represented by what? By fiat currencies that have no intrinsic value in the accumulation of them, and then the extension and expression of power, authority, and control by those who have the most of nothing. And the whole thing is an insane construct. And you know, Fabian is wrestling with zero. Well, actually, he's not wrestling anymore. He's sort of zeroed in on his PhD thesis, and what he's focusing in on is societies that have no market or transactional dimension, past, present, any model or example of a collective or community that has no exchange baked into itself, and wrestling with when such a example bumps up against another neighboring one, and if they trade something, is that an exchange or is it something other? And he also raised, which was sort of a fascinating mind twist for me, was the elimination of surplus, the concept that we create what we need, we create only what we need, and that there isn't a reason for the creation of surplus or more above and beyond needs. And there was one tribal civil group that if they hit their needs thing with whatever it was, whatever the food thing was that they were dealing with, anything surplus was burned. Because if they didn't need it, they would effectively burn it and return it from whence it came. And so, I mean, there are some really huge fundamental flaws with market, exchange, economy, the concept of there having to be an economy. And all of these things have nothing to do with living beings and living ecosystems and collective survival and sustainability. They're artificial constructs. And to your point about folks that purport to be at the leading edge of the new and the transformational and all of that stuff, if they have any of the ingredients of the economic, industrial, profit, currency, spirit, and essence stirred into the soup, they're playing the past forward. I don't care the names they put on it. It's a variation on the old. It's not, there's nothing new about it.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a variation of the same theme here, actually, with profit and how we relate to that, just like we relate to technology, because profit is an abstraction, like money is an abstraction, and we give value to it from our psychological personal experience. But to see profit as something outside of the human experience, this is when it becomes ridiculous. And somehow there is this weird construct which places it almost in two different worlds. I mean, what is a currency? Currency is simply an abstraction. What is a currency worth? It's worth what we say it's worth. I mean, it's that simple. It's just like a number. It's, it's floating through the air. So it's exactly the same theme as far as I can tell. That the way we relate to profit with money, with all of these measurements, just like the way we relate to technology, as if technology just works in a little box and lives its own life. No, it doesn't. We are continuously transforming it. We're continuously informing it. We are the caretakers of the abstractions, the technologies, everything. And somehow that message has to be made clearer. I feel that's a part of what's needed to really clearly illustrate the relationship between humans and abstractions, humans and these technologies, the interrelationship in three-dimensional physical space.
I still think there's an interesting question that is not quite so clean about this profit, this P word. Because to me, there are still interesting and valuable things that can be done at scale when we as humans get together in groups. And by that, I mean things like, effective vaccines, maybe, looking in the subatomic particle level. There are glimpses into the universe and insights we get and wisdom to be attained when we engage in those activities. So profit by itself has enabled, but it's not the only way to enable. We got to get rid of that way of scaling. We got to think about a new way of scaling ourselves so that we can actually pool our efforts, seek some alignment, go in a single direction, and then choose another one at the appropriate time. Those are the interesting questions I really, really, really am curious about. How do we scale successful collaboration to planetary scale, global scale? Because those are the problems that are really, staring us right in the face right now, whether we open our eyes or not.
And I'm interested in looking at if we were to design a recognition of value flows from the ground up, what would that look like? What's existent? What is a value? When we look at our values in terms of living on this biome, this living biome, what comes up as collective decisions that we need to make in terms of our limits. And of course, it immediately pushes back against the extractive paradigm and what exists in the world today. And there are great forces that are really stoked with the way it's all set up. But what that actually means is that, we all know what that means. We see it. And so I think that a lot of energy can be expended on the terrible things that are happening. But I think that the best use of time and energy is to deeply consider, what would we build from the ground up if we were to reconsider what value is, how each person on the planet could be taken care of, how we can shift our notion of economy from what it is now to a representation of the flows of energy and value that exists, that put us at the center, that put, hey, Harry. The economy was created by human beings. A tree doesn't need an economy other than, the fungal conversations that are going on underground. That's a form of economy and exchange. So we do see exchange in nature. And we have actually created this abstracted, extractive form. Now, we've not thoughtfully created it. It's not considering the human at the center. And it's also not considering the non-human parts and pieces of our whole world. So, I'm interested in, if we were to start now with what we know, with the best of what we know, what would we create? And allow there's core assumptions around the way the economy works, and that I think need to be tested and, maybe kicked. I want to do that work.
I want to poke a little bit about this thing about the economy created by humans. I actually don't think so. I think the economy was created by economists. We need to...
Aren't they humans?
I don't know. That's being generous. They're equation pushers with, no binding from their abstract, variables into real human experience. They don't have good models of what being human is. And Doug knows that. So I would say the idea the value needs to flow, to me, is still a very strange one. If we're all thinking about things like capacities, capabilities, skill sets, knowledge, artifacts, is there a way to use that language to scale rather than using the term value? Value is a very overloaded term.
That language is the language of machines and processes. It's not the language of living beings.
No, it's not. Capacities are capacities of people as well.
Well, but that's objectifying and relating, reducing people to their capacity to contribute.
Okay, so we'll choose to disagree on this one, Doug.
No, wait. So I'd rather reframe and contextualize the idea that values is a multifaceted, multidimensional domain. Today, right now, fiat currency happens to be one of them, and it happens to be the only one for a staggeringly large percentage of the world's population. But it's only one, and there are dozens more. And if I say thank you to Lucy, and she says you're welcome, there are values being expressed and given in that exchange. on an experiential, biological, emotional, spiritual level. And there are so many facets of values and how they flow by and between us as people, by and between us and the biome around us. So the question becomes, as a sort of foundational question, if you get out from under all that industrial and marketplace and economic and finance-centric stuff, the question becomes, how do we plug into an ecosystemic value flow orientation where all of us are in it together? Every living thing on the planet is in one boat. It's called planet Earth. And we all have one pot, and we all have really one overriding agenda, which evolution and circumstance, knowledge, and affordances has made possible. How do we take care of everybody and everything in a way that is sustainable, period? And how do we care for each other? The only reason it becomes scarcity driven is because somebody said, I got it and you don't. And if you want it, then. If you eliminate this business of ownership and control and aggregation and concentration of wealth, power, profit, authority, control, if you just sort of like don't invite that to the party and say, let's start from a blank sheet of paper, Tammy's question about what do we want to create, then developing an ecosystemic flow vision and picture has none of those features built into it. It doesn't require them, and they have nothing to do with informing, enabling people to contribute themselves, time and attention, and enabling people to receive value flow on an individual level relative to their needs and their existence and survival.
So I think we're up against the hard limit. Sorry, Tammy, I know you had your hand up, but I think we can try, but I don't think we can entirely eliminate this notion of quote unquote ownership. Now think of a different word if you like, but you know, the idea that there's a tight binding between who can make decisions about certain things. That is a fundamental barrier to this global, everybody shares everything kind of notion. I think it's not practical. I think it's real to recognize that there is some limitation to everyone having every control over everything. That is, that there is a space here around me that I control in some sense. I control what shirt I put on my back. Nobody else controls that, you know? At some point, I control, you know, certain things around my environment, whether or not I mow the grass, you know, out back. I control that. So somewhere, and especially if we believe in privacy, you know, there's expansion of that boundary as well. So I understand that the negative ramifications of ownership and control need to be carefully examined, but I don't think it can be entirely done away with. Over.
Go ahead, Ed.
You, I wasn't quite ready. I was sort of, I thought that you were going to go.
I'll go. I just wanted to break value and values into the alphabet code. So value is channeling all that is, informing the containment of energy. So that's value. This channel of everything informing the containment of energy. Values adds an S. So channeling all that is, informing the containment of energy connected. So, you know, what is, oh, thanks. So, yeah, thanks, Harry. we did a bit of modification with some of the letters. V is more like channeling. But essentially for me, what that means is that there's this open pipe, this channel of everything. And, you know, when we value things, we inform that containment of what that is. So there's a bit of a loose boundary around that containment. It's like, yeah, being able to hold that worth. So anyway, just chuck that in there. Thanks, Harry.
Okay, I think this thing that that Sam was pointing to is very much core, because when you were talking, Tammy, about the assumptions that are made, I was sort of feeling, well, okay, let's look at one of those assumptions. And I think what Sam has done has pinpointed an assumption that we have that about who makes decisions. I think it would be really good to focus down on how do we work out who makes decisions in this new paradigm. And what you said was something about, well, it's no good if everybody makes decisions about everything. But there are certain principles that you can say that you're entitled to make a decision about something that affects you. And if it doesn't affect you, you're not involved in that decision. That's only one thing that, anyway, I'm over.
Yeah, I just have a few. Yeah, there's so much interesting coming up here. Yeah, who makes decisions? Obviously, we each have to make the decisions of who we are or what we do. But of course, on a larger collective scale, if there's trust, then some people, experts, can make decisions about some things that are for the good of everyone. I think that's probably the idea behind the society contract, right? But you mentioned currency, fiat currency. I mean, it's quite important to remember there's not one fiat currency. I mean, there's loads of fiat currencies, and they can be translated into each other, and they can all be translated into cryptocurrencies. And as far as I can tell, fiat currency and cryptocurrency is essentially the same thing. It's simply an abstract entity. It's one of those non-human entities, perhaps, Tammy sometimes talks about, just like a corporation, just like a government, just like a group, just like the GCC, just like numbers. So it's these abstract creations of the mind that we associate something with, and we associate a certain value with currency, but the value comes from us seeing it as valuable. So that's why stocks are no more valuable than people think they are. And when people don't think a stock is worth anything, the stock plummets. And when they think it's worth something, it goes up. It directly follows how we value. Then Sam mentioned something very important, that this seems to be related to scale and cooperation on scale. Because if you have millions and billions of people who are going to cooperate and work together, coordinate relatively effectively, you can't have a system where each person has to consult with everyone else, etc. So you have to have simplifications. And that seems to be why money has sticked around, because we need to have something simple that can allow us to coordinate complex activity across millions of people. Then the question was asked, is there a better way to represent value than just these numbers? And when Tammy asked that, it was really interesting, because I was thinking in my mind, yes, there is. And that's through pictures. for example, cartoons. And just then Harry came into the room, the cartoonist, right? And you know, many of Harry's drawings, he draws people, he draws words, and he draws connections and relationships between them. So that is the language of pictures and the language of cartoons, which is very interesting because the language of cartoons is a combination of pictures and words. And of course, with words, just like Tammy's alphabet code, we see how we can create meaning into the words. Just like
It's an
you have this.
abstraction.
Yes, it's an abstraction, and we create
Back in the
the
abstractions
meaning.
again.
Yeah, so the abstractions, they're so close to us, aren't they? They're such a essential part of being human. It's this relation we have with all of these abstract entities. And then values breaking down in the alphabet code, and we see that we receive all which is, and then containing it into something smaller, which might be seen as a representative of all that is. And that's what happens when we have a statement of value or an abstraction that we assign to value, or a currency or a price, etc. So what could be a better way? Well, one possibility is if there could be a way to use the technologies we have to actually to describe everything in terms of personal experience, to describe everything in terms of pictures of events that happen with people, and to create a language where we can see the entire flow of things that have to be done, and the value chain, so to say, the distribution chain. And Harry has one drawing where I saw it, where he had one person standing there talking about this part of the chain, another person standing there talking about that part of the chain. But then the picture itself, when you went back, you could see that they were all talking about the same chain. I'm sure you know which one I mean. But, well, it's one of your drawings when it's sort of these different people in suits, and they're sort of discussing different parts of this process, which is one flow of resources being changed and transformed, etc. So that could be a direction worth looking at. Whether there could be a more accurate way of representing value than these very crude numbers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for introducing me, Glenn. I'm happy to be here. I, of course, missed at least 1 hour of extremely important unblocking, but I was out having fun. Okay, I was thinking about my own blocks here. Back to what you brought here, Glenn. As a result of Tammy's presentation, I of course considered, oh, what should I say and tell when I'm having my story to them? So I made a start, and I made a first sketch as a, and well, I'll talk to that later. But first, what images do is they use another part of the brain than the language, and the immediate benefit of that, you start using both parts of your language. So you have more thoughts, more space to think about, and more points of consideration. So that's helpful in itself. Secondly, when you make a drawing of a situation, you as an observer are outside of the situation, looking in. So it helps very much to think out of sight of the box. Thirdly, I'm lecturing here. It's my experience. Well, you can't draw nonsense. You get an abstract thing. Abstract concepts create abstract drawings. So they can be pretty to look at, but they don't convey meaning. Because all meanings is connected to reality, the stuff we live in here, this three-dimensional space I'm confined to. So basically, that's why I always draw humans, because everything we do is the most important players in that, and that's you and me. and people are very wired to recognize people amongst everything. You can see walking through the woods and there's somebody passing like 100 meters. You'll know it's not an ant, it's not a deer, it's not something, it's not a dog. Hey, that's somebody, as we call it. So those bodies is basically what I start with. I don't need to know anything about the situation. I draw somebody and then the context around it. And it's always related to reality, because scientists have found all our thinking, also these most very abstract, high-floating conversations we have, are metaphorical. And it all comes back to, okay, what do I do? What's my next step? And what is my choice? Either instinctive, emotional, totally unconscious, or, excuse me, do I have a conscious choice? Okay, this was prepared to. So bringing this back to what I heard about economy, which is an abstract term, it winds down to what I choose next time. So also decisions that are just in one person deciding in my life. That's me, just me. And it's extremely lonely making choices and decisions, because nobody else can do that for me. And even if I would see that somebody is more of an expert, more entitled, it would be my choice to listen to that person. So it's always the most abstracted thing. They finally come down to this point in time where I am here and I have to make a choice or a step or not. With that, I'm complete for the moment. Thank you.
I just wanted to expand the meme Harry referenced in terms of it starts with the people, with the person. So I keep coming back, I keep hobby horsing and beating this drum around the human being, the experiential, as the frame that has to be at the top of the pyramid. Because that's the reality of us in generative action, activity, collaboration, whatever. We create whatever we create experientially in reality. So a hero of mine and colleague for a while, I put shoulder to the wheel to help him with his work, was a guy named Bernie Krause. He's a bioacoustician who in 1968 started recording in the wild, and he recorded the most remote locations around the world. And because he was not great visually, his hearing acuity as a sense, as an input, was heightened. And so when he was out in nature, he heard an orchestra of the biome. And what he discovered was that in each of these locations, the biome that existed in that spot was unique for that spot. And the reason the various critters that were there ended up there together was because from the lowest frequencies, which are the amphibians and larger mammals and whatever, on up to the highest frequencies of birds and insects, and all the bandwidth frequencies of the various creatures between, the reason why a particular biome would have the particular creature occupants that it had was because they aggregated, each one of them landed there because they found their frequency available so they could hear each other. And that mapped to collective survival strategies like frogs chorusing around a pond. That mapped to breeding. That mapped to whatever they had to do by and between themselves as members of that ecosystem. So why am I raising this based on what Harry said? So Bernie was hired by a large paper company called Weyerhaeuser to validate that non-clear-cutting selective logging practices were better than clear cutting and okay. And they made the mistake of hiring Bernie to prove that. So there was a picture taken of a forest, and Bernie recorded the forest before selective logging. And there's a sonographic recording of the frequency bandwidth that's full, from the lowest frequencies to the high. It's this whole orchestra of creatures that live there. And then Weyerhaeuser went in and did selective logging. And then a picture was taken after the selective logging. And at least based on the picture, everything looked identical. It looked like it hadn't been touched. It's like a miracle. And then Bernie went in and recorded, and it was silent. 90% of the biome was gone. And he went back and recorded 10 years later, and it was still silent. So and just as a footnote, from 1968 to the present, he recorded in over 1,500 locations, most remote locations around the world. And as of when last he and I was working for him and with him 10 years ago, over 50% of those locations are now silent. So when I sort of bring it back to the human embodied experiential frame and filter as the filter that has to inform the new, whatever it is we do in doing us differently, it's because it takes all of our senses. It takes all of the inputs that are available to us by and between each other and how we communicate, us in relation to our environment, us in relation to biome around us, us in relation to our world. It takes us leveling up experientially to do us differently. And it's not about individual media or senses then extrapolated to data streams and artifacts. It's like all of us needs to be brought to bear, generatively speaking, collectively, if we're going to save our ass. And figuring out how to be in that space with that awareness and prioritization means a lot of things that we're currently very, very focused on and consider very, very, very important be put in a very different place. And some of them not even on the boards, because they just really don't inform experientially how we're going to enact and create and do us differently on the scale we have to avert an extinction. And I'm complete.
I just want to notice you're back in explaining the problem, and I think we already agree. But it's a deep touching example. I don't want to get away anything of that, and it hurts me to hear that, and I know. It's also noticed here when I was young, and there was somewhere you will ride with the car, and there you have all these insects on the window pane. They're gone forever. I know that, but I need my attention to focus on what we can do. But as you say, shoulder to tire. That's the one for me. That one, Anna, please.
I just got the feeling when Doug was describing this biome that that's what we are, that we've come here because this frequency that we are hearing actually allows us to communicate with each other.
You see one.
I've had lots of things bouncing around for a while, so I'm going to try and put it together in a way that's talking about what we need rather than what's the problem. So I had this image in my mind before you mentioned forests, Doug, of, you know, if we think of a bunch of trees in the forest, they give, you know, whether it's nutrients or oxygen without ever having a conversation with a bird or fungi in the soil about what am I going to get back. And I thought of where we started about trust and a feeling of safety in a group. So they have some like inherent feeling of safety, that they know that they give what they have, they will be given back what they need. And I'm reminded also of this Philip Shepherd, this Radical Wholeness book. I think he actually even talked about this, trees and forests, that we need some kind of felt sense of belonging, and having our needs met. And then Tammy also you come back to mind from what you shared yesterday when I listened this morning about, you know, what you want to give. And I'm trying to find some way of putting those all together. But I kind of, when Harry started talking about drawing, I had this picture of some of your people, Harry, almost like connected like trees at the feet. That if we had that feeling that we're all in this together, that we would give, you know, like in the way that a tree gives. And that doesn't preclude our own sense of controlling our space. You know, a tree decides how much it gives. It decides when it opens its leaves. It decides, you know, there is like individual decision making, but there's still a bigger sense of like, I put what I have to offer into the pot without ever needing something that shows I gave a value or I'm owed a value. So how do we get people to, if you feel that, yeah, okay, then this is maybe the final part. If you feel that, then you start doing it, because we're all doing it. So then we have to get people to feel this, more people to feel this. And then maybe we're onto something. And that feels like it comes back to other things we've talked about. Okay, so hopefully that got somewhere.
Beautiful.
Spot on. As a side note, I'm just reading this book. I put it in front of the screen before because this is about a forester that started his life in the industrial paradigm, like we're producing wood here, and he ended in noticing that this is an ecosystem that's so intertwined, and that all creatures in this biome communicate all the time with each other. They need to in order to survive. And he also states, and I think he's right, that it's not as automatically abundant and benign. It's a hard life. Either you struggle and thrive, or if you will just let go of it, then you suffer and die. So it's not the promise that life will be easy and just flow and we'll always be happy. I think that's a fairy tale. I wish it was, but I failed at it. Let's put it that way. So it's hard work, and we are on the thread, and a lot of creatures already have died and gone extinct, and we could very well be the next. Mother Earth will survive, but will we? That's our problem. And I think I totally agree that we urgently need to feel that we're all in the same boat. And the name on it is, at this point, is Titanic. We are sinking. And so we either or find each other, and that's, I think, one of the things that's happening quite a lot thanks to new technologies like this one. We can find each other, we can connect. And then a lot of process starts. I'm not already doing that. Oh, I need to connect, I need to trust it. I need to open up. And if I need to feel, and if I start to feel, all of a sudden I feel all those blocks, we talk about it. I kind of pushed away in order to fit into the matrix and pretend that I'm a professional and all that and whatever. And okay, so there's a lot of work, and I consider myself intelligent and somewhat mature and all that, and I already struggle, so I can't blame anybody else not being able to do so. But considering that and feeling the urgency of the problem, that's a problem in itself. But I think at least those of us who are willing and able to connect and do the work necessary should really put their shoulders on it and we should get our shit together as fast as we can, as thorough as we can, in order to proceed. And I'm working on that, as some of you very well know, and I know a lot of you are doing the same. And we should start progressing and not throw away everything we learn because you want to invent something new, because I need my old shoes to keep walking until I'm ready for the new ones. Thank you.
So I want to tell a story, a retelling of the story of evolution, if I may, as an experiment. So if we say that we've spent 13.4 billion years, putting little particles together to see what might happen, over a course of time, some things started to become self-sufficient. They could hunt, they could kill, they could eat, they could persist, they could reproduce. But very recently, there came a species that actually didn't have to do that had excess capacity, and they had this notion called leisure. Lions have a little bit of it, we have more of it. And this leisure time allowed us to do all kinds of different things that didn't necessarily have to do with immediate survival. It could be entertainment, it could be hedonistic, it could be scientific, it could be wisdom-inducing. But if you look at a cosmological experiment, and if you believe that we humans are here kind of as the first appearance of these things that have this excess capacity, there's two things that can happen. Either we learn to use that excess capacity to further our own resilience and survival, or, as Roman civilization showed us, we can fiddle until the city burns and we go away. And that's the challenge I think we have ahead of us. Same thing happened on Easter Island. So the privilege and opportunity and responsibility is, what can we do with this excess capacity that we've got? If we look at this long arc of history and give ourselves the position of having this privilege of developing excess capacity, excess meaning beyond that which we really need minimally to survive. We have the capacity for the entire species to survive if we choose to execute that. So I'm looking at this as two things we can do. Either we can grow up and make this really work, okay, as a society, or I think there's a second possibility. We can be ark builders. We can foresee that most of us aren't going to make it. And we got to create some kind of ark, whether it's genetic stash somewhere in cryo freezing temperatures or whatever, or some little lifeboat that goes out to Mars or the moon or whatever. Elon Musk thinks this way as well. I think our choices are three, okay? The third is we die. So either we can survive, and that means we have to grow up and learn how to, manage ourselves and, be, quote unquote, responsible for ourselves. Or two, build arcs. Or three, die. Over.
I wonder whether building arcs and growing up is the same process. It just came to me. If we want to survive and thrive as a species, will we not then have to also build one arc and maybe many arcs? because it can't be micromanagement, right? It has to be building something that can continue on its own. That just came to me when you said that.
After the next great flood.
Maybe before and after, yeah. Any floods.
I'd just like to read something from this book that I'm just reading. She says, right now, what I think is that the kind of work of which this is an example is centrally necessary work. Whether our understanding makes a difference or not, we must try to understand what is threatening to kill us off as fully and clearly as we can. Willy-nilly, it is a matter that we cannot help being interested in. And in addition, it is part of a struggle that we cannot help engaging in, part of our impulse to pit our energies against that threat as efficiently as possible. There is no way to feel confident that this struggle can really turn the lethal tide, but neither can we be certain that it will not. And in either case, to fight what seems about to destroy everything earthly that you love, to fight it not passively and autistically with denial, and not unrealistically with blind force, but intelligently armed with your central resource, which is passionate curiosity, is for me the human way to live until you die. That's from The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. It's Dorothy Dinnerstein. It's an old feminist book from the last century.
Let me add a small meme and then I'll give way. I think, in a sense, if we are all very well-meaning people, and I actually believe most people are very well-meaning people, we see these problems and we rush out to solve them. So somebody sees a hunger problem, they go rush out and solve that one, or pit their little effort against that. Somebody else sees a water availability problem and goes out and does that. The problem is these efforts are too independent. There's got to be a way that we can magnify our impact collectively if we're really going to make big dents on these things globally. I think that's the biggest problem we have now. Not that there's a dearth of well-meaning people. There's a dearth of meaningful, coordinated activity. And by that, I don't mean centrally controlled. I don't. I mean coordinated in some way that's magnifying our collective impact. Over.
Tammy?
Yeah, I think that this kind of leveling up into meta perspectives is important because it is all intertwinkled, as Sam would say. And I just wanted to put this idea out to the group, which is we have all the time in the world. And that's not to say that we have moving forward past the present moment, but rather in the present moment, we have 7 point however many billion bodies with all of their time and attention. And I'm curious, what happens when we really come into collective resonance and share that time, attention, and in building these understandings. There's tons of people who have time that they can contribute. They need that is part of what needs to be coordinated. Many of us are deeply there. And for me, I feel that the people that are already on that living edge of change, that's where I want to put my time and attention, because they're already there. I don't need to convince the masses. The part of the point of the documentation is they can see it when they're ready. But I want to invest my time into people that are ready, that have, thoughtfully created something that they want to share, and then help to connect those people so that there's this deep connecting that we're doing through our communication. I mean, what is communication? Who needs to know what information in what order to make something happen? These are the design elements that I think would be really useful for us to look into, and to bring together the, I'm going to say resources, even though my friend Don Morrison doesn't like that word. But we can bring what we have together to create something more. I just think this "we have all the time in the world" is a really important concept for us to consider.
So I want to be attentive to time. We're a little over 2 hours. And what I'd like to suggest is a sort of closing wrap up if anybody wants to put a period on their experience. But I also, just as a footnote, Lucy, you're absolutely welcome to the Saturday experiment if you want to join that party and take your portion in turn with your dreams and what you want to bring to the world. It is not a closed. It is not a closed system, and to the extent you watched it back, you're up to speed, which is the part of the idea. Part of the idea of the experiment and the practice. So I just wanted to mention that it's. I hope it'll become an expanding and living practice. So anyway, and
Thanks.
I would like to thank all of you for co-creating this and keeping this going, which is not something I take for granted and something that's really important and valuable for me. So this is a big part of my value flow back to me side of the ledger, that we go where we go and we learn what we learn and share what we share. So thank you.
I'm really fascinated by the way this conversation developed, because the first half felt to me, I have to say, just a bit flat, like we were all being nice to each other or something. And this second part, it feels like we touched on the most important bit that somehow which feels crucial to me. And I would love to follow this part more. But it's amazing, that was just my experience. I'm not saying that that was how it was, but that was. And so thank you.
Anna, could it have a name for you, this second? What made this second part so crucial for you? Just a word.
Oh, one word? No. Just really looking at how we want to get to where we want to get to, really looking at sort of, what are the things, where can we focus? Like talking about lack of coordination, what do we do to coordinate something? Or, even thinking about what do we want this new world to look like the decision-making part of it, which seems to me to be crucial. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to second that, Anna. It's was interesting because in the first half, yeah, we were kind of nice to each other, and that was sort of the point too, I guess, because we looked into what it means to have a safe space and this feeling of trust in the group to speak openly, and then we reflected a little upon that, and after a while, we sort of naturally drifted into really speaking openly and touching, as you say, on really the core issue. I also really felt that we were really close to the core in the second half of the conversation here, which has to do with coordination. It has to do with a reconnecting to nature, to seeing what we're a part of, and the questions of whether we can find a collective way of maneuvering through that, which is better than the ones that have been tried. And I certainly think we can. And but also this, like Lucy said, that if we feel this connection, then we begin to change the way we act, and everything changes actually. So that was also like what I heard. The core theme of Tammy's vision yesterday was something which really moves our common understanding forward, like a real full understanding, which is just one part, but it's really the whole. And that by coming into this process where we can move this understanding, which also has a sense of remembrance, I guess, because it's a part of us who kind of always has known it, but that this is the kind of transformation of consciousness which makes us feel this connection to the larger whole, and also helps us to develop this ability to be curious and interested and attentive, really, to listen and to see the value of everyone as they are, which was also what Doug talked about early, and a big theme for Tammy, obviously. And that's also inherent to the process. So I still feel that the conversations themselves is almost right at the center of what's really needed, especially when we can have them flow like today, and then also that something can and probably needs to be generated out of it, perhaps even a new technology, or even something even more radical, a completely new approach to technology as a whole and to abstractions as a whole, and theory and reality and fantasy, how it relates. So yeah, and that's also what I feel we're moving into with these deep dives, which we had a great session yesterday. Many things came up, and I mean, you're really brave, Tammy, to go through it, because it's not easy to just be the first one to sort of put everything out, because it's so much. But I really found it helpful, and I thought we all did. And Lucy said earlier that she'd seen it and it really was something she could resonate with. So I really like this direction too, and certainly hope I'm ready to be in the hot seat and not too far in the future, I think too. And I think that this is a natural progression of the process, that we really to clarify a little further what each of us really can see as this grand vision. Because today I really felt that we do have a very clear sense of more or less where the main problem is, or the main direction of inquiry needs to go. So that's a natural starting point to move gradually into a little bit more specific, but slowly and patiently, and because it's very big things that we're exploring here. Yeah. So thanks everyone. Great talk today.
Thanks, Glenn. I'm happy to be to learn that I missed the boring part. Yeah, just kidding. There's so much I kind of want to say. Let me try to word a few, as I also always invite you to kind of word it. I have the sense that all the bits and pieces of the solution and the vision we need to bring into the world are there, but we still need to kind of make it a whole, so that we have one meme, one story, one poem, whatever we need, whatever form it takes to be seen by others. And for us ourselves also to give the clarity that say, okay, that's my direction, that's what, not that it's carved in stone, but that's what we help need to see the Northern Star and navigate towards it. And my English is improving as I do this conversation. I learn 2 new words and I'm trying to combine them. And I'll just finish with that. It's coagulating agency. Thank you.
Now that I have you here in person, Tammy, then I'd say thank you. I want to say thank you in person for watching everything that you shared yesterday. I told with the others before you joined, especially that poem. I sat listening just with tears streaming down my face. It was really, really, really beautiful, very special. And so much of what you said was like somebody else telling my story, or it brought out so many useful things. So it was, thank you very much. Thank you, Doug, for the invitation about Saturday. It's, I get up very early and I go to bed very early. But I was thinking about this today, and this brings up the idea of value, that like this is so valuable, this opportunity to me, that I realised that, okay, well, that's just a habit I just have to change for Friday and Saturday, and to try and be part of this on those other times. And today I've got this, I'm not sure if I can articulate it very well. I feel it right now, but putting words to it is difficult. But I kind of have a felt understanding of what we're trying to do here, rather than a brain understanding. You know, safety and trust and value, and I think it has to brew for a while, and then maybe it will get clearer. But for me, it seems there's one thing that's clear, that seems when we try and do everything in words or with systems or structures, that's when we're going apart. And when we come back to like feeling and knowing, feels like that's when we come together. Yeah, so thank you, all of you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your feedback. And I love how we're progressing. It feels really deep, and we're really getting somewhere. And yeah, so I'm really grateful. And I would love, Lucy, to do a session with you one-on-one if you're open to that, and we can schedule a time.
So a question that's been brewing in my mind is, we as humans, what can we do? There's 3 things that we think we can do. We think, we feel, and we act. Is there anything else? Fill in the hole, okay? Is there anything else we do? other than thinking, feeling, and acting?
Just being.
So, just being?
Being.
Okay. Okay, so let's call it 4 things. Although I could, yeah, so let's just call it 4 things for now. So in those 4 dimensions, how can we evolve? How can we grow up? How can we mature? Because I hear things, even in this conversation, which my ears perk up. You know, my ears perk up at things that say, oh, we understand in words, but we don't understand yet other ways. And if we understand in feelings, then that feels deeper. What I would like to understand is, can we do it across all these dimensions? We may not yet have the skill set to do it in words, but I think it's a useful thing because, you know, these words were created by us and help us do many things. They help us build bridges. They help us, you know, feed everybody on the planet. You know, they're not invaluable. They are, sorry, wrong choice of words. They are not valuable. So I'd like to learn how we can be across the dimensions of human experience, whether it's being, doing, acting, feeling, thinking. Can we grow up? And what does that growing up look like? So that we don't have to just say, oh, well, you know, let's connect at a heart level. But I want to connect at the heart level, a 2nd chakra level, a 1st chakra level, 6th chakra level, 7th chakra level. I want to be able to do it, you know, across all our energy centers, all our ways of being. And recognizing that co-evolution, that co-development, that co-maturity is imbalanced points to a direction of inquiry. There's so much more to say, but let me leave it for there.
I want to mention that something seems to be happening that happens in my work with people also. If the understanding is deep enough, then some tension falls away in the group and people are just silent, just being. So that could very well be a 4th dimension, Sam. But then we get it emotionally and we feel that it's real from our experience sense and we understand it. And if that's 80% in each level is good enough, and then say, oh, aha, and then people can mull on it and digest it. Also, I like what's happening.
Just to put a placeholder in the question, to me, being encompasses the other 3. I'm not yet clear on whether it's independent of the other 3. So that's why I'm kind of still quite puzzling at that one.
Me too, but I don't want to get in the next discussion. We're finishing up.
I just want to say, although this is going into the next discussion, that as I understood what you said, Sam, it feels really important to take those other dimensions with us, to bring them into balance with the feeling and the thinking. Oh, no, bringing the thinking and what was the other one? Feeling and thinking and acting. To bring the thinking and the acting into balance with the feeling. Yeah.
That's why the heart is in the middle. That's what it does all the time.
I also love the word behavior. That's been on my mind for a while. That's also one of those words kind of encompasses all of the dimensions. The behavior.
I think we need another gathering.
Yeah.
Some of you may have caught it. as I heard certain words used in this conversation, I've been adding them to our list of words. And just as a last note, to me, I wanted to revisit this idea of meaning. Because if you think in terms of either thinking or feeling or acting, if I hear or experience or see something and it has no impact on how I think or feel or act after I've experienced it, to me, that's essentially no meaning. But if something actually alters or affects the way I think or feel or act, then that is the meaning it has on me.
Okay, so this is progressing against my free choice, but then again, I was here and then Facebook was open in order to get here, and then a meme crossed over there from somebody else, so it's very important to me. That's a new word that might be useful here, meaning economy. It's a great measure.
And that workflow document, Sam, that's the same document that we began on, right?
Yes.
Right,
If you like, I can share the link again.
It's like one document that just gradually grows from all our talks. That's actually a really valuable generative product.
Sam has been producing all this stuff all this time.
Yeah.
Good work, man.
Okay, I'm getting hungry. I'm going to say bye-bye.
Yeah. I think we're good.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
We're done.
I think we're done.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it.